Hey, welcome back to another Just 5 Mins, episode 90. Crikey, nearly at the centenary, which is nearly as old as I am. But anyway, what have we got? What have we got? It's Fermyon. Fermyon Spin WebAssembly. Actually, this was another great reminder from my good friend Tim Abel, who I've done the occasional podcast with, and he's got his own podcast and a very big Rust proponent and developer, as well as obviously C#, .Net and all that good stuff as well. So thank you, Tim. I did an episode on Fermyon. I'll explain what that is in a minute. Actually way back, but it was sort of in the early days, and I didn't quite understand what they were really doing. And then I think I ended up doing what is it, episode 65 actually, I'll put some links below, about WASM and WASI. Okay, and that's what Fermyon is. Fermyon are an open source development company. They've been around for a little while. They've actually done some quite interesting things that I didn't realise. Like, for instance, they did the Visual Studio Code integration for Kubernetes. And I think they actually built projects like Helm, which is the package manager for Kubernetes. I did not know that. Excuse me. And anyway, on to today is Fermyon, and they've got a framework called Spin. Okay, so what if you want to go and have a look back at the WASM WASI? Basically, WASM is WebAssembly. Okay, and I suppose without I'm going to get shot for this, but it sort of got a little bit of prominence by Blazor from Microsoft, because that was Steve Sanderson, I think, guy at Microsoft from Bristol, no doubt, I think, originally. I don't know why that's surprising. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, but it's essentially allows you to run binaries. So in the .NET world, that would be some C# code, .NET basically, in the browser. Okay, because the browsers, the common browsers, have had WebAssembly for actually some time, actually. So did I say actually enough? There you go. And interestingly, that allows you not only to run .NET, it can be C++, it can be Rust, it could be lots of other languages that can be compiled. And the benefit is that it can run very, very quickly in a sandbox environment, just like good old JavaScript. So it can run in your browser as native code. Okay, so Fermyon have done something called Spin, which allows you to create WASM, WebAssembly apps, in a very nice, neat way. I'll put the link there. Like I say, I did a little look back at them a while ago, and especially with WASM and WASI. And WASI, by the way, is WebAssembly System Interface. So that's like a common set of platform interface for those binaries to communicate with whatever the underlying system is. Because, of course, because it's completely portable, it can run in the browser, it can run in another host runtime, a WASM runtime, and that's what Fermyon Spin technically is. I know it's a lot more, but that's fundamentally what it's doing. It's allowing you to run WASM apps anywhere, and they do actually. Fermyon do have their own cloud. Okay, but they also, so this WASI is quite interesting. So, you know, there's a standard out there that companies are building too, and it allows this sort of common set of interfaces for regardless of wherever your WebAssembly is running. Okay, and so Fermyon, I think, it's basically, it does feel like they are on the crest of a wave. This WebAssembly stuff is not new, but the way it's being used, I think, is gaining more and more prominence, really. And by the way, if you're wondering, well, hang on a minute, didn't we have Docker containers to do all this? Well, yeah, And there's an interesting article. It's an older article that I did reference a while ago, but I'll put it back in this podcast. And you can, in Docker, you can opt. It's still a beta feature at the moment. I've just been looking at it, and you can actually run WASM binaries. So it can, I don't know if this is the right phrasing, but it can containerize the WASM binaries in Docker. Okay, so Docker are obviously picking up on this as well. And when you look at some of the stats that they've got, it's quite incredible. I think Fermyon have got a link. I'm trying to find out where it is, but spin their framework. When you look at some of the startup times, and especially with the serverless world, so you think like Lambda on AWS or Azure serverless functions, there's always this sort of startup time, this warm-up time of the technically the mini container getting spun up, essentially. But if you have a look at the way that Fermyon are using this, and they've got, like I say, they've got their spin Fermyon cloud. Okay, when you do look at this, and by the way, you're not limited to just one language. They've got a lot of other SDKs for different languages there. Certainly they've got .Net, they've got Go, they've got Rust, obviously, yeah, and lots of others. TypeScript, I think that's Node, maybe, or something like that. But anyway, but when you look at some of the stats, and like I say, this is native code, so you can write in whatever those languages are, still connect to things like SQLite, because if you're going to be running in maybe a browser, you can take advantage of SQLite that's can run in the browser, on your mobile apps, and goodness knows what. It's a whole world. And when you look at some of the stats, like I say here, is you've got Fermyon spin, for instance, 52 milliseconds from spinning up a function, a module, whatever you want to call it, the WASM module, 52 milliseconds versus AWS Lambda and Azure Functions, 250 milliseconds. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when your app is getting responsive and it wants to, doesn't want to run all the time, only when it's needed, that is quite incredible, isn't it? So it's basically like the evolution of Docker containers, but WebAssembly, and it's obviously a much smaller platform. So when you look at some of the sizings, for instance, a typical Docker image could be up to 200 meg. Now that's still pretty impressive, regardless. But when you then look at things like a WASM app of a similar thing, 3.2 megabytes. I mean, because it doesn't need all the infrastructure. It's already got that, with WASM and WASI. And yeah, you've got to add packages and things like that. But bear in mind that you've got to do the same in Docker anyway. So that is quite a reduction. So Fermyon basically is Spin is the framework. They do have the cloud. They've got a Kubernetes sort of connection. Far too much to go into. I've gone way over 5 minutes as usual. Again, I keep saying this actually. I'm going to have to do a video on a couple of these things to actually show it actually working. And the final thing I'll just mention is from .NET 8, and certainly going to be in .NET 9, I think, is if you're very much a .NET developer, then WASI and WASM Experimental was released in version 80.100. Okay, so it was back quite a little while ago, and it's got WASI Experimental. That's the, again, WASM WebAssembly System Interface. It's got that and some of the WASM tools there as well. And of course it was using, Blazor has been using WASM for the browser for quite a while now. But what this is doing is taking these WASM modules and allowing them to run pretty much like Docker. So you can actually have this portability. They're very, very small. They can run natively fast. So yeah, there's a lot more to delve into this, as you can imagine. And it really is just 10 minutes today. So apologies for going over the just 5 minutes. Like I say, I'm going to do a video of these. I've got a video channel that I keep meaning to get to called Just 15 Minutes, which will be a little bit more realistic for these types of things, so I can actually show and go over things a little bit more in detail. But that's what I've got for this time. So enjoy, take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.